Welcome back to the Balancing Act podcast. I'm Andy Temte. On the Balancing Act, we talk to business leaders and industry experts to explore the balancing acts we play in our professional lives and learn about the events that put rocket boosters behind their career success. Today, we have Stephanie Reisner joining us. Stephanie is the CEO of GPS Education Partners, a workforce development nonprofit based right here in Wisconsin. She is also a co-author of the new book, Make School Work, Solving the American Youth Employment Crisis Through Work-Based Learning. Welcome to the show, Stephanie.
Hi, so good to be here. Thank you so much for the invite.
You're over on the east side of the state, and I'm on the far, what we call the west coast of Wisconsin.
Yes, right.
East Coast, West Coast. We'll have our own little fight there.
I'm in the, it's called the state of Milwaukee, right? So I'm in
the state of Milwaukee.
That's right.
Very good. Well, Stephanie, please give us the elevator pitch version of your story.
Yeah. So, I'll go a little bit way back, right? So I grew up with 3 girls in a family that didn't have much, but I had absolutely the best parents. And my dad told me constantly that I could do anything I wanted and don't let anyone tell me differently just because I was a girl. And to make sure that I believed that, he got me a job every summer for 4 years at the manufacturing facility that he worked at. Mostly so I could earn money for college and have it better than he did, right? All parents want some element of that. But what he didn't realize is he was actually creating a work-based learning girl. And I fell in love with manufacturing. And I know this is so weird, I still love the smell of a production floor. It's so weird, but it's part of me now. And I discovered that I learned best by getting into it, getting hands-on, learning from real people and real experiences. I had some great people that I learned from along the way. So when I graduated college, I took the lowest paying job offer because I had the greatest opportunity to grow. And not all kids know that those are the years that you really need to learn, and then the pay is kind of secondary. But luckily I had learned that early. I joined Generac in the most entry-level HR role possible. And I still remember my interview because all the other things didn't matter, because we spent most of the time talking about Generac's growth vision and what my role could be in it. And I think more and more too, I tell businesses about that's what young people want to hear. So I was already driven to do wonderful things, and now I was inspired. So over the next 16 years, I advanced to VP of HR. And in 1999, with the whole Y2K craze and everything else, my team hired 1,100 people in 1 year. That hiring surge itself, throughout that, we realized something, and we learned something, as I learned as an individual and as a business, that this really was something that I kept seeing, and that was that young people were simply unprepared for the world of work. And that discovery planted a seed. And in 2000, that very next year, we actually started what is now GPS Education Partners. It's been my privilege to be a part of this from the very beginning. And in 2008, I was asked to lead the organization. And I will tell you, it wasn't my plan to pivot to run a nonprofit. I was going to be a manufacturing girl, and I was going to lead organizations. But I knew and I felt that this was my purpose. And the chance to be a strategic partner to industry still, and transform the lives of thousands of students and families, I would tell you I'm living the dream.
That's awesome. So other than your dad and his instilling workforce development in you, do you have an event in your life that just really accelerated your career?
Yeah, I will say, and this was at Generac, right? So without question, I received the gift of a mentor early in my career. And Dawn, so to have another woman executive ultimately in manufacturing that was my mentor. I mean, she was a trailblazer, finding a woman leader in manufacturing at that time was really rare. And I got that gift. That woman, man, was brutally honest. She pushed me beyond what I thought was possible for myself. Um, but yet she always grounded me, right? Mentors, that's their purpose as well. She always, brought me back to what was most important, and that was family. And to this day, she continues to challenge me, always there for the critical conversations and to let me know how much she cares. And, I understood this got really personal to me when I became CEO and started running GPS Ed because mentorship is embedded in everything that we do, right? When you're a young person in work-based learning program and you get that somebody who believes in them and encourages them, man, that makes all the difference, especially at that age, right? And our student graduations, when these students stand up, yes, they talk about the skills and they talk about, the business and everything else. But what they talk about is their mentors, that there was somebody that cared and helped show them the way. And in some cases, believed in them at times that they didn't even believe in themselves. And so because of my mentor, Dawn, I know exactly what that's worth.
That's wonderful. So let's start with GPS Education Partners. Give us a very brief description about the organization and its purpose.
So, GPS Education Partners is a nonprofit focused on bridging education and industry through the lens of high quality work based learning. 25 years ago, I mentioned earlier, we were born out of industry. And that origin story really matters because it's very distinctive. We were able to see the problem from both sides, right? We became the connector and really the interpreter between education and industry. And we knew what worked because we launched this within industry from the very beginning. So, most would agree that our traditional education system doesn't work for every kid, right? Too many young people, especially those that aren't necessarily headed to a 4-year college, are graduating with a diploma, but no real plan, not really a path forward. And even though those that do go to college aren't persisting the way that they should, or they're taking years to find their way. And we hear that back from employers as well. So then on the flip side, you have employers in high demand industries like manufacturing and healthcare and construction, et cetera, that are desperate to get the skilled talent they can't find. And careers, young people aren't being properly prepared for. So we are the organization that helps bridge that gap, right? Work-based learning is about exposing young people to the world of work and building that foundational confidence, developing those durable life skills and helping them make better decisions about their future, regardless of what path they choose and whatever career path they choose. But I would say what makes GPS Ed really distinct is the depth of alignment across the whole ecosystem, right? We're not just about placing students into internships or apprenticeships. We're working with educators and employers and communities and families to ensure that every student is on a pathway that actually leads somewhere meaningful, right? Helping build up that capacity, academic support, career coaching, structured employer engagement, all built around that long-term opportunity. So there's a mind shift that we're helping employers now with as well, right? They're realizing that instead of competing for talent later, they need to develop it earlier. And so they stop being just buyers of talent and now they're becoming developers of it. And that's a fundamental shift that we've been able to help kind of them turn around. And so ultimately our goal, pretty simple, eliminate those dead ends, ensure that every young person has access to high quality work-based learning. So we can send them into this world confident that they'll thrive, regardless of the workforce changes that we're seeing or the path that they choose. And then when that happens, we see entire businesses and communities thrive as well. So we're in that sweet spot, and we've been and had the opportunity to do all of those things kind of throughout this 25 years.
Yeah, that's excellent. There's just a growing cacophony of voices that are supporting this concept of stronger apprenticeships and the connectivity between educational institutions and employers. I'll name drop here my dear friend Brandon Bustede. He and I worked together at Kaplan, and he was at Gallup before that. Brandon is a real voice in the value of workplace learning, and that all young people should have a job, whether it's flipping burgers at McDonald's or landscaping or whatever it is. Get out there and work.
Yes, yes,
So
and hopefully that's meaningful work, right?
yeah,
I think some of the quality elements that we continue to learn about, or that others learn about, and we know, are fundamental, and that's a lot, of what's in the book as well, is really important too for kids. You can gain something from any work experience, right? But if you have that advantage of a meaningful work experience that kind of aligns with those 4 A's with the students, that's
yeah.
that is life-changing.
Yeah, you're not just going to work again at McDonald's to make a few bucks. You're
Right,
going there as a 16-year-old to learn
right,
this, which
right.
will carry forward throughout. My dear wife Linda was worked at McDonald's when she was 16, 17, 18 years old, and she still talks about the value of that education that she got
Right.
during that time.
Working with all the different team members, working with customers and customer facing. There's so many things that these young people learn with these real world work experiences, and obviously the basics of showing up on time, understanding how you need to present yourself, right? These students walking into these manufacturing facilities, or these businesses, they have to stand up straight and look people in the eye and really understand, what their role is, in this work, and that people are counting on them. And that's a huge shift for a lot of these students that in some cases never had a job before.
Yeah. So take us a little deeper into your organization. Can you give us a success story that connected the business community with educators to improve youth employment outcomes?
Yeah. So, at at GPS Ed, like, we don't believe there's one way to connect, business and education. So the best models really meet communities where they are. And so I've got two examples, that I'll give that show kind of what's possible when both sides are genuinely committed to work-based learning. And the first one is our partnership with 3M. Now, obviously, that's a big employer with multiple facilities, across the country. But I use that example because, they took to heart, that the National Association of Manufacturers was projecting 2.1 million job skills gap by 2030. Like, that's right around the corner. And so 3M decided, okay, we're either going to, like Generac, right? We're either going to stay and see this in 5 years and not be ready, or we're going to do something about it. And so, through their philanthropic arm, 3M Gives, they actually launched what's called the Manufacturing Academic Partnership, so the MAP program. And in 2022, they partnered with GPS Ed to help them scale it. And so the mission for them was to help students discover meaningful careers in advanced manufacturing, in the skilled trades, and careers that could lead to family sustaining wages. They felt that that was their responsibility as an organization, but also, selfishly, they needed more of these young people into these, kind of high demand skilled, careers. And so the structure was kind of a hub and spoke model, right? So the technical or community college is at the center. And then the high schools were kind of feeding into that. But what makes this program remarkable is actually how 3M shows up. And they don't write a check and walk away. Not that that's a terrible thing, but they provide mechatronics equipment and curriculum, the same technology used in the real factory floors. So these kids are getting real world, environment that's coming into that classroom for their first exposure and experience to some of this work. And then they fund student scholarships. So their employees serve as mentors, guest speakers, hosts for facility tours, and then they invest in teacher training. So educators are also equipped to deliver the content with a whole lot more confidence. And so they're taking this from, kind of both sides and meeting in the middle. And it really comes to life when you talk about the student experiences in all of this. And one student story that just kind of captures it perfectly, started through dual enrollment in high school, and they earned 2 certifications before graduating. They completed an associate's degree with the scholarship support that they got from 3M. And then he was promoted to a maintenance technician immediately upon graduation. And that's the model that's working exactly how it's intended. That the, industry and business coming together, helping fuel and fund some of that work, but helping the education side and with training, development, equipment, and then real world learning for that student that was able to then understand this is what I want to do. And now he's got the job at 3M, maintenance technician, and advancing through a career that he absolutely loves.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And so that's kind of the big company side of things. But then our other model that's in Wisconsin, our education center model itself that we've been doing for 25 years, I would say, every education center that we have that's within the business itself is that little mini ecosystem. And so it is multiple schools and employers and the community wrapping their arms around this education center to say, we all have a role in this work, and we're going to make sure that at the students at the center that we are doing what we need to do to make sure that these students have a path to success. And so we have now graduated over 2,000 students within that education center model. And these are students who otherwise might not have graduated at all. A lot of the students had given up on school, given up on themselves, and now they're thriving. And I think the best piece of all of this too is that now we have schools that are saying, I want to do that too, and I want to bring that to my community, and I want to help run it.
Yeah, that's wonderful. Stephanie, we're going to take a really short commercial break, and we're going to talk more about workforce development on the back half.
Okay, great.
Want to understand money, markets, and the economy to make better financial decisions? I'm Andy Temte. Join me every Saturday morning for Money Lessons with Andrew Temte on YouTube or your favorite podcast streaming service. And we're back with Stephanie Reisner talking about workforce development. Stephanie, tell us about your book, Make School Work. And the question here is, if you met a random reader in an airplane or on the street who's read the book, what would you want their unaided recall of their experience with the book to be?
Yeah. So Make School Work was built from real experience, and it comes at a time when really students need help navigating through a successful path, and educators and employers and community um, conveners really need a guide on how to, or the framework for how to implement high quality work-based learning. We know that, and we've heard for 25 years, that the biggest barrier to high quality work-based learning is, one, understanding the critical need and the value of it, but two, they don't know how to even get started. And once they start, how do you do work-based learning well and with quality outcomes, right? And ultimately, how do you scale that? How do you create sustainability? So my hope is that whether you were an educator that was reading this book, or you were an employer and a, an HR person that's like, finally, how do I do this? A community leader, and you took away that, one, we're all in this together, right? We have a responsibility to be part of this solution. And you came back with, okay, I there's some, real how-tos. There's a guide on how I get this started and how I can continue to advance the work, because in some cases they started but they got stuck. Now, how do I advance through that? And sometimes we need to rally around one definition, of what is high quality work-based learning, and in there, you know, we say, look, it's rooted in the 4 A's, which should be easier to remember, right? That authentic learning that develops a student's aspiration, ability, and agency to succeed in the world of work. And the secret to success for our kids is executing on those 4 A's, And so for them then to come back and say, okay, I've got a definition. I understand that there's 25 years of expertise and experience around this. Now I'm ready to do something, and I think I can take a next step, and I don't have to be in this alone. That, GPS ed and things that, obviously the different parts that are in here are going to help me do that.
Good. What about it was either I think before the show, we were talking about being a buyer of talent versus being a developer of talent. And the old school mindset for many leaders and managers is, well, if Susie doesn't work out, I just go into the talent market, and humans are coin operated machines, so I'll just get another one. And that's not working. So that mindset isn't working so well. We all have to become talent developers. Is there a message in the book for that leader who's still stuck in the talent buying mindset?
Yeah, I think that, when we talk about the kind of those early phases of design and development, and it is about getting employers involved right away, right? Some of the mistakes that schools tend to make is that they do all this in a vacuum, and they try very, very hard to do good things for their students and develop, these programs and everything else. And then they bring in the employers and say, here's what I've got. Don't you want to be part of this? And the employers are going, no, this doesn't align with what I want, with what I've got. So there really is a guide kind of for both sides to say, you need to be, one, understanding both sides why, and then who do I need around the table, right? And that's these high level folks at the employers. And then how do I go about setting the goals, the outcomes, and the metrics, right? You got to speak the language of employer. And when employers get involved at that point, everybody's got buy-in. And that's how you're going to get employers to really go, oh yeah, we do have to be part of this development, but there's an ROI on the other side of it.
Yeah. So let's do. I've got two mentorship moments for you. These are hypotheticals where I place somebody in front of you and you're providing them mentorship and guidance. In the first question, you've got the superintendent of schools for a mid-sized school system sitting in front of you right now. They want to make a difference in employment outcomes of their graduates, but they've got a pile of competing priorities getting in the way of
They
making
do.
progress. What's your advice to this individual?
Yeah. First of all, I might just need to take a moment with them and take their hand. We get it. That you're not failing. The system wasn't designed to make career connected learning easy for them. So that this is going to take effort and energy, and there are competing, priorities. So, to be real, right? Before we talk strategy, we always need to understand, where are you right now? In what you want to do with your school. And sometimes it's the right time and sometimes it's not, and that's okay. Right. But if it is the right time and they are building out a strategy and they are looking to kind of a coalition of partners, my first thing would say, I've got a couple of pieces of advice. First, I would say, don't build a program. We don't need more program. We need to build a coalition, right?
Yeah,
So
yeah.
don't try to lead this from the inside your district in your little four walls, right? You need to lead it beyond those four walls with a coalition of community partners that you are a significant part of, you show up for, right? But, the biggest mistake is that they do this in isolation, and, employers need to engage and they need to engage earlier. So flip that and say, hey, who are my top 3 to 5 employers who already care about this? Invite them to co-design it from the ground up. And part of like designing what does success look like, and then you know what? They're bought in. And often not only will they give you time, but they'll give you money. So those are things that are really key. When you are a superintendent and you walk in alongside a CEO and a community leader, and you say, we are collectively committed to the economic future of our young people, that's when you start getting movement. That's
Beautiful.
the right direction. So
Beautiful.
start small, right?
Yeah.
Don't try to eat the elephant all at once. Really, a lot of this really does require walking people through change, including their own staff. We have a lot that, superintendents innovative and everything else. And this team is going, are you kidding me? One more thing? No, 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 no. Just make sure that you're bringing them along and that you don't pile on everything all at once. And then the third thing I would say is just find a neutral convener, right? Because so often schools and the superintendent too just tries to add on one more thing, and they try to be the employer recruiter and design the programs and evaluate. They will just get burnt out, and honestly, they won't be able to stay focused on the things that they need to. They need to lead the district. Find a neutral convener that can help you pull all that together.
Like GPS.
Right? GPS Education Partners, we are
Yeah.
here for you.
Yeah. So,
Absolutely. And we do that for so many schools. And I say that tongue in cheek, but it really is true, right? That look, we've got all the experience, we've got this background. We have been and are the practitioners for our Wisconsin model, right? So we have been in their shoes. We know what that looks like. We can meet them where they are and walk alongside them.
all right. Mentorship moment number 2. You've got the parents of a ninth grader sitting in front of you right now, and they're concerned about the job market that their teen will encounter when they graduate, and they worry that their school system isn't making workforce development a priority. What's your advice to these parents?
Yeah, so actually I was that parent. My daughter was kind of in this moment not that long ago. We talked to your son as well. And so I've sat down honestly in families' homes and sat alongside these parents and talked about this exact thing. And, and the worry is legitimate, right? Even the ones that are involved don't know how to navigate this. The job market that the teens are going to graduate in ultimately is going to be genuinely different. It's going to look different than it does today, right? So, but what we do know is research tells us that students that participate in high quality work-based learning, the job shadows, internships, youth apprenticeship, et cetera, are more likely to graduate. They're more likely to find employment, and they're more likely to find work that actually aligns with who they are. So parents want to get more involved. And so I would say kind of three things that we can give to parents that don't have to count on just the schools, right? That they can take control of some of this as well, is ask specific questions of the schools, right? When parents get involved, that sends the signal to schools that they need to pay attention. Not just what does the school have for career programs, right? But what work-based learning opportunities exist for my ninth grader right now? What career pathways does the district support? Who can I talk to? And honestly, get their teens exploring now, right? Don't wait for the school. There's career interest inventories, industry visits, right? Informational interviews. My daughter, Olivia, that I was talking about earlier, she was interested in nursing, but it wasn't until she got that hands-on that she knew for sure, right? So every professional that your young person meets is the door that could open later. It's not too early for that. This is now ninth grade is a perfect opportunity when they're starting to think those things through. And the more information and the more exposure and the more opportunity that they have to get that, that's a game changer. And then, my other, piece of advice would be to advocate, connect with other parents, reach out directly to some of those employers. You don't have to wait for the school. That's what Olivia did. We went directly to some of those employers, and sometimes the answers that, these parents get are surprising, right? I would say show up at your school board meetings too. Ask about the district's career connected learning strategy. Hold them accountable, right? And then when it's not just you, but it's 5 parents and 10 parents and families, right? That's when the conversation starts to change, because this is about more than just a job, right? About getting students. Every parent wants their son or daughter to know who they are, what they have to offer, and how to navigate this world of work with confidence. And every parent wants that for their young person. So those are some of the things that I would say,
Excellent.
give them advice on.
All right. Well, Stephanie, where can folks get a hold of you?
Yeah. So we have a makeschoolwork.org site. And so the great part about that is not only are there wonderful things to connect on, but also there's resources, there's surveys, assessments, and things like that. So, not only are those kinds of things in the book, but then that makeschoolwork.org takes it to another level. So that's going to be where ongoing resources are going to be for you. So I would highly recommend that. I am always available to talk. Would love to, get your feedback and share your experiences. So S. Reisner at gpsed.org is always something I'm happy to connect directly. I'm on LinkedIn as well.
Good. Stephanie, can we do 3 lightning round questions?
Absolutely.
All right. Well, Stephanie Reisner, you've just won a $100 million lotto jackpot, but there's a stipulation that half of your net winnings go to one philanthropic organization or a general cause. Who do you pick?
Yeah. So I know this is going to be so passe, but my fund development team would kill me if I didn't say GPS education.
Sure.
But more broadly, right? I'd invest in scaling high quality work-based learning and that earn and learn pathways, for young people, right? I assimilate like work-based learning right now. It kind of works like a farmer's market. It's great when they show up, but it's inconsistent, kind of dependent on who shows up that day. I want to use money to build the best grocery store, right? Reliable, accessible, available to everyone, everywhere, all the time. So that kind of investment, investment in work-based learning, it reaps returns over and over
Awesome.
again.
All right, question number 2. I give you access to a really small time machine, and you can send a message to an earlier version of Stephanie Reisner. What's the message, and what previous version do you send it to?
Yeah, right. Oh, so many times I could have learned a lot of things along the way. I would say I would go back to the Stephanie kind of like in her mid 30s, full of fire, right? Running at full speed, convinced that, if I push hard enough, everything will fall into place, right? And what I would say is breathe, just pause for a minute and breathe. You are so far out in front, driving, controlling, willing things to, into existence that you can't see the people behind you trying to follow, and your team, your collaborators, even your family, right? So here's what I know now that I would tell her, the most powerful thing you can do as a leader isn't to drive harder, but it's to bring people with you. So trade that controlling and supporting to driving and leading, and you'll actually go further and do more with more impact.
Right. Well, we are all works in progress. What are you focused on right now in your personal journey of growth?
Yeah. So with being in, GPS Education Partners for the last 25 years, Generac and then this is my baby, and it's hard to let go. So honestly, it is letting go. I have got the best team. I've built my career being deeply involved, and this is my baby. But I know that I can't be part of every detail, and it's just not going to serve GPS Ed well. So right now, my personal growth work is learning to lead from a higher altitude and trusting the people that I hired and resisting that pull to get back down in the weeds. And it sounds simple, but man, it's hard.
No, it's not
Yeah.
simple at all.
No,
It
no.
is
So
so,
so
so
I'm
hard.
working on it. My team some days thinks that I should work harder on it, but but I am working hard on it.
Excellent. Well, Stephanie, thank you so much for being on the show today. Really,
Yeah.
really valuable conversation.
Yes. Thank you so much. And thank you for bringing the visibility to work-based learning.
It's my purpose is to teach, coach, mentor, and hopefully do a little inspiring along the way. So the fit is really good. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
My name is Andy Temte. This is the Balancing Act podcast. You can find us on all the major streaming services as well as out on YouTube. Please like, subscribe, rate, and most importantly, share this public educational good with your friends, your family, your colleague, and maybe a neighbor. The show was produced by Nicholas Temte, and we'll see you next time on the Balancing Act.